Q. For what are the areas of concern in the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Bill? Are the provisions of this bill consistent with the observations made by the Supreme Court on triple talaq? Critically examine. 250 words. The Hindu background. Triple talaq has been an issue affecting Indian Muslim women since a long time. In the recent SC judgment that made this practice unconstitutional, bringing the sense of relief to make Muslim women. Acting on this, the government introduced the bill in the parliament to take action on this practice. SC judgment. SC declared that practice was arbitrary and declared it to be unconstitutional and consequently void. www.insightsindia.com 34 www.insightsays.com. Such a practice is otherwise abhorrent and considered illegal in various Muslim countries around the world, and taking note of the stand of the Muslim Personal Law Board deprecating the practice, it should be discontinued. Consequently, they granted an injunction against the practice of triple talaq for a period of 6 months from the date of judgment, enabling Parliament to legislate on the subject. Bill provisions are consistent with the SC observations. At first glance, these developments come across as a classic example of collaboration between judiciary and legislature. The Supreme Court made a decision, the government conceptualized a bill to reinforce the court's decision, and Parliament is now in the process of enacting that bill into law. No bill is not inconsistent with the SC judgment because, however, this narrative collapses when the issue is considered more closely, as the bill is at odds with the very judgment that it purports to reinforce. The statement of objects and reasons accompanying the bill indicates that it is meant to give effect to the court's judgment, which it claims had failed to produce any deterrent effect in reducing the practice of triple talaq across the country, shows there was no effective collaboration. The statement speaks of illegal divorce and is therefore a contradiction in terms. Triple talaq is simply not a divorce in the first place. Criminalization of triple talaq does not emanate from any part of any of the 3 judgments rendered by the Supreme Court. The victim of triple talaq is entitled to subsistence allowance and custody of minor children. The question of custody or allowance does not arise where a couple remains married. This again goes against the basic purpose of court's judgment. One of the significant questions that arose before the court was whether it would be appropriate to defer to Parliament on this issue. While the 2 judges in the minority favored imposing a 6-month injunction to enable Parliament to enact legislation on the subject, the judges in the majority specifically chose not to do so. In future, there is an even chance that the court may decide that the law criminalizing the use of 3 words violates the right to equality under the Constitution. Concerns with the bill. Muslim husband pronouncing triple talaq is criminally culpable. Had this legislation not been initiated, the practice would still be void. Therefore, the legislation to this extent does no more than restate an existing statement of law. Drafting of the bill had been done in a haste, without taking into confidence any of the stakeholders, would lead to wide-scale distress for women, making them even more vulnerable. It would force them to put up with abusive husbands or the fear of them being jailed. It would subject an otherwise functional Muslim couple to the moral policing of outsiders, since the crime has been made into a cognizable and non-bailable offense. No plead insanity clause is attached, which means that a basic right to freedom, dignity, mental condition, and whether or not a Muslim is fit to stand trial have not been taken into account. There is no provision that the wife alone can file a complaint alleging that an offense of triple talaq has been committed. A third person can also do it, based on which the husband is arrested. Being non-bailable, only a court is entitled to grant bail, which raises several implications, like despite marriage being intact and the wife not wishing to complain, the wife has to suffer the consequences of her husband being sent to jail. That affects her husband's capacity to provide for the family. The complaint may be based on a lie, yet the husband may land in jail. It is not understood why the husband needs to go to jail when the marriage is subsisting and valid. The concept of subsistence allowance and the right of a woman to custody of her minor children in the event of pronouncement of talaq by her husband do not hold law.